Welcome to Seasons of You, a podcast about seasons of change and our ever-evolving cyclical nature as women. I'm your host, Sarah, and I'll be sharing my experience of harnessing the power of the cycles as a guide for my life. And I'll be speaking to incredible guests where we'll explore struggles, growth, and expansion, and what inspires us to create and live a life that we truly desire. Get cozy and honor this moment for yourself as we dive in to the seasons of you. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which I live and travel. I give thanks to the Indigenous Australians who have an enduring and deep relationship to the land, skies, and waters of this country. I recognise that sovereignty was never ceded, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. I also give thanks to my maternal lineage, to all the women who came before me, and to all those who came before you. This episode was recorded on Peramangk land in South Australia. So today I wanted to speak to the way that we use and move through time in our culture versus when we work through things cyclically. And as I record this, it's the beginning of January, so we've just tipped over into a new Gregorian calendar year. And I've been having lots of conversations around this over the last week as we have moved into the new year, and as I've been sharing about my new planner that I've been using, a cyclical planner, but also talking about the way that I cycle through the season of the seasonal year. Which in the Southern Hemisphere is not beginning in January. So I wanted to speak a little bit about that today. So in the culture that we live in, we are based around the Gregorian calendar. So the calendar year that begins in January and ends in December. And, this is what our society is structured off of. It's what all of the diaries, planners, all of that is based off of, unless you're going financial year. But everything is kind of like that chronological order of January to December, and everyone sets their New Year's resolutions and, like goals for the year in January. And then in December, you're kind of like wrapping everything up and, bringing the year to a close in December, which is great. Neither of these are better or worse than the other. Neither of these is the right or wrong way. It's just, different perspectives. And that is the way that I used to do things, like everyone, living with the Gregorian calendar, until I learned a new way through cyclical living. And so now I'm like, that doesn't feel quite right. Like when I really tune into it, it doesn't quite feel aligned or quite right or as easeful as it could if I'm trying to set my intentions and everything in January with the new calendar year. And this is the conversation I've been having with a lot of women this week, is that they are perhaps struggling to set their intention word for the year. This is something that I have done for the past probably 5 or 6 years, set a word of intention to kind of carry me through the year, or a phrase as an anchor phrase for the year. And this is actually the first year where I haven't set one and it hasn't felt right. And there's multiple women that I've spoken to that they just can't land on one. They can't choose one. It's just not quite sticking, not quite feeling right. And look, there could be many reasons for that. But for me, I know that it's because it's not the right time of year for me to be choosing one word, phrase, whatever, to guide me through, because I actually chose that back at the beginning of the seasonal wheel of the year. And I'm kind of halfway through that, right? I'm going to get into that a little bit more. But if you're kind of sensing this for yourself, maybe it is your sign to explore more of a cyclical way of being in terms of setting big intentions for like a whole year. And so with the calendar year, the Gregorian calendar, I think particularly for those of us in the Southern Hemisphere, it just doesn't feel quite right, because if we look at things cyclically, the new year in a cyclical way begins with the winter solstice. Now, in the Northern Hemisphere, that makes sense because that's around Christmas. Um, and so that's the winter solstice. That's kind of like the bottom of the wheel of the year and the beginning. And so then by January, you're just kind of coming up into that part of the wheel where you're like setting intentions, and it's actually perfect timing for those in the Northern Hemisphere. For us in the Southern Hemisphere, though, we have actually just hit the summer solstice and are coming down the other side of the wheel. And so we're really at the opposite end of the wheel in terms of where we would typically set intentions. So for me, when I'm doing this seasonally, I am looking at, okay, June is the winter solstice. That is when I've done a lot of like the letting go and we're sitting in the void. And then we move into like a couple of weeks after, that's when I'm starting to set intentions, plant my seeds. And so that's happening in July or August, not in January. January is the time where we're like celebrating everything that has come to fruition and we're seeing everything in full bloom and full illumination before we start to move into harvesting all that we have planted, in the previous 6 months. So if things aren't feeling quite right for you in setting intentions or New Year's resolutions or choosing a word or a phrase for the calendar year, this could be why. And like I said before, it's not that one is right or wrong or better than the other, but that is how I choose to do things now. And it feels so much more aligned. It feels easeful. It feels like I can flow with the year. And it just feels better in my body. I feel like I'm not kind of pushing myself against like these external energies. Of course, I still use the Gregorian calendar. Like I have a calendar planner. I've got, calendars like, for our family that are based on January through to December because like that's logical too and it makes sense. And that's the way that a lot of these things are set up and designed. So like, yes, I still use these tools. I still go month by month. Like I'm still doing all of that as well. But for me, the bigger picture is looking at how am I aligned cyclically and what's feeling best for me. I'm not saying that just after the winter solstice is the only time that you ever set intentions, not at all. Just like you wouldn't say the only time you set a goal is in January as a New Year's resolution. We are always setting intentions every day, every moment, like all the time. And every single intention we set, every goal we set has its own cycle. But if we're talking about this year cycle, one whole year, what one can we choose that is going to bring us most ease, that is going to help us feel most free within ourselves? And for me personally, that is what I call the wheel of the year or the cycle of the year. Now, if you're listening to me talking about this going, I have no idea what she's talking about. This is like kind of the first episode of the podcast. And like, what are you yabbering on about this wheel of the year? Don't worry. Perhaps just tune into what feels like it makes more sense for you. Have you been noticing at the start of January or the start of this Gregorian calendar that things just feel a little bit off? You're not really sure about setting an intention or like starting New Year's resolutions and setting goals. And it just feels a little bit like, or it feels like I should be doing this because it's a new year. Maybe it's time to try something new and think about, what if it was like the middle of winter and like just after that and it's sort of becoming early spring? How would that feel in my body? And would that feel like a better time for me to set an intention then? Like you think of the seasons, we're planting seeds in early spring so that they can start growing. How does that feel for you in your body? Start there. You do not need to understand the whole wheel of the year to kind of start to shift your way of thinking and find the way that is best for you. Just a little food for thought there. I will be talking more about this whole wheel, this whole year cycle, and how we can work with the wheel of the year, the yearly cycle, the seasonal cycles, because it is such a foundational element for me in how I run my life, my business, make decisions, set goals, set intentions, all of those things. And I've been doing it consciously for, I don't know, 3 years now. And it's really changed so much for me. Things feel so much more easy. I don't feel like I'm pushing against these big external seasonal energies. I feel like I can flow with it and like I'm mirroring nature And like, we are nature, right? So we're not just mirroring outside external nature in the seasons and the plants and what they're doing. We're actually mirroring back to ourselves what feels most natural for us, finding our natural rhythm. So if you're interested in learning more, please let me know, because I would love to do this year a Wheel of the Year workshop where I go through all of this. I do have an episode on my other podcast, Moonlit Mothers, which I co-host, that we talked through the Wheel of the Year, and we did an episode for each kind of seasonal element. So if you're interested in learning more right now, I will link that. You can go ahead and listen to that in the show notes. But if you're just like, oh, this has just sparked something little for me, I'm going to observe and see how that feels for me, go forth from here. Keep it really simple. And if you want to chat through it with me, please come in, connect with me on Instagram, flick me a DM and say, oh my God, like that makes so much more sense to me. The Gregorian calendar year is just feeling a bit sticky, a bit, I don't know, like I'm trying to force it. But maybe if I learned a little bit more about this seasonal cycle of the year, that might feel a little better. Come and chat to me. I'd love to guide you through. That's what I'm here for. I'm a cycles guide. I'm going to be teaching you all about all of the cycles: moon, menstrual, seasonal, year, like all the things, all the layers, the seasonal phases of our lives. But you don't need to know all of it or every single layer to start to work with them. Literally just take one thing out of this episode and go from there. Anyway, I could talk about this for days, and I will be, because I'm doing this podcast and I'm really excited, but I'm going to leave it at that for today. I need to turn my air conditioner back on because we are midsummer. It's 42 degrees and hot out here. I'm in the caravan and it is getting hotter and hotter by the minute. So I'm going to turn the aircon back on. I turned it off so I could record and it wasn't too loud. Anyway, please come and chat with me. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Thanks for listening. I want to invite you into a moment for integration, because consumption of knowledge is great, but where it turns into wisdom is when we reflect and bring it into our own lives. So my invitation here is to reflect for a minute on what's been shared today, and then choose one tiny step you can take to bring those lessons into your life. Take a deep breath and devote yourself to that step today. With my deepest gratitude, I am so honoured that you have chosen to listen to this episode today. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Be sure to check the show notes for any relevant links, references, and resources. A final note that this podcast is a space for sharing personal stories, experiences, and inspiration. It's not medical or professional health advice. By listening, you accept full responsibility for how you choose to take or apply any of the information shared. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. You are a sovereign being. Always follow your heart and choose what feels best and true for you.